Everybody, Carl Schoof here from Snorkel.tv. Welcome back from the break. I'm going to continue talking about some of the troubles that I had when creating my Twitter spitter. And as a refresher, you'll see here that I have a little SWIFT in my web browser. When I hit load, what it's going to do is load the XML of a Twitter user and pull out all the image URLs of that user's followers. And we're going to load those images, spit them out onto the stage, and animate them. And again, this is not a how-to tutorial. This is more of a how-don't tutorial, or how not to. Okay, because I ran into a lot of troubles when making this very simple app. Again, I built it and got it working within 2 or 3 hours, but spent another 10 hours accounting for all the possible errors that you can deal with when loading assets off of foreign domains. So what I want to do is show you some of the issues that I had now specifically with loading images. And the first problem I had with loading images was loading images that may have had malformed or funny looking URLs. Okay, there was a time when I was testing my app and it would load every image perfectly and everything was great, but there'd be these oddball occurrences of the thing just either stopping dead in its tracks, or I'm getting errors left and right. So I needed to track those things down. So I'm going to switch over to Flash right now, and I have an older version of this file called urltroubles.fla. And what I want to do is show you an example of this application locking up. So I'm going to test it out. And again, in order to test this movie properly, I found myself having to just hit lots of different user accounts to see where possible errors would occur. And so Snorkel TV loads fine, but I was searching for maybe some non-technical users, and I said, you know what, let's see, how the images load from American Idol. So let's just hit load, and I'm waiting here, and this is what would happen. I'd get a blank screen, and I saw the XML progress bar go across, and I'd be like, what's going on here? So I decided to do some traces, and one of the first things that I found was that using LoaderMax's parse method, in which you pass in an array of URLs. So I was going through the XML, pulling out all those profile image nodes that we talked about in the first video, and I was just passing them into LoaderMax. And LoaderMax, its parse method allows you to pass in any type of files, and it's going to make the appropriate loaders, whether it's a SWIFT, JPEG, MP3. It's going to read the URL and figure out what kind of loader to create. Well, the thing is, I found that I was passing in information that didn't have a file extension. Okay, so LoaderMax was saying, I don't know what to do with this. Okay, and so it was giving me a runtime error, which should be expected. Now, if I was also tracing out all of the different URLs, and as I scroll through here, you'll see that most of them end with .jpeg or .png. And that's pretty much par for the course. Now, there are some others that are going to come up every now and then, and if we scroll all the way up to the top, so right here, sorry about that, folks. So Jenny Rose 7 uploaded an image, but there's no extension on it. It just stops with the word normal. So let's try one more account, if we will, and just to test it out super quick. That was American Idol, and oddly enough, there's some guy here whose name is Impossibility. All right, I wonder who that is. I was trying to load in his information, and I was getting a similar result in that my XML would load and then a blank screen. And again, if we scroll through my errors here, you'll see that something popped up. This guy .jpe. And .jpe is not an official extension that LoaderMax recognizes either. I could hack LoaderMax to allow that, but I don't want to get into that right now. Here we have .jpeg, and that's a valid URL. And just scrolling through the list, you'll see .jpe shows up, and it's just interesting. Some have uppercase JPEG. So I know that this guy also loads in a BMP file, which we don't want either, and that gets chucked out too, or it's going to cause us problems. And so again, we didn't upload these images, so we really don't know. Apparently Twitter, when you upload an image, is extremely tolerant of what you upload or how those URLs are generated. So I had some problems here. Before I could go into Loader Max, I needed to make sure that my URLs were legitimate. So what I was going to do was use a regular expression just to test to see whether or not a file name contained .jpeg or .png or .gif, one of those things. So in order to find the proper regular expression, I came across Grant Skinner's regexer. Now, before I go any further, a regular expression allows you to search a string for a particular pattern. In this case, the pattern we want to test is to see whether or not my string or my URL contains .png or .jpg or .gif for the different types of image files that I want to be able to load. And this language, it appears to be some derivative of Klingon and something else alien. And I really can't read it all that well, but due to this tool, you can see a bunch of regular expressions that the community has shared for common tasks such as validating email addresses, finding out information from URLs, and it's really quite robust. And so what I did was I did a search here and I came across this image extension validation, and it says this checks to see if the image is a valid image. It checks on JPEG, JPEG, GIF, and PNG. Now, right out of the box, I said, you know what? That sounds like it's exactly what I need. Now, nothing against this particular user, but I had some problems with this expression here. So I took that very simple regular expression, I went back to Flash, and I plugged it into my Twitter spitter. And now I'm going to test my Swift out. Now this version has the regular expression in there, and you'll see that we're taking a few seconds for that XML to load. And now if I load up, you know, somebody like my buddy at Impossibility and do a load, let's just clear all this stuff out. So there's my progress of my XML loading. And now that I've added that regular expression, I'll show you where I put it in a second, you'll see that we don't get any errors. But if we scroll up to the top here, you'll see that I'm detecting now all these invalid URLs. And unfortunately, with that regular expression, if the extension is uppercase, it fails the test. So a lot of these uppercase JPEGs failed. This BMP failed, which is great. We don't want those at all. We have JPE also, which isn't necessarily what we're expecting. And going through the list, so those are the invalid URLs that we found. If I load in, let's clear all this out, and maybe we'll test another user like American Idol, and we'll load in their users there. All right, we'll get the XML to load. You're going to see again, we have a whole bunch of invalid URLs. So let's just wait for everything to load and go to the top. So my regular expression here is working, but it's catching some stuff that I don't want. JPEG, uppercase, uppercase, uppercase. And then you'll see that we even have Jenny Rose. Once again, you'll see that her normal without the extension was not considered valid, and so we took it out of our array, and thus everything loaded. Well, I want my regular expression to load .jpg uppercase, all right? Now, the thing is, something like this is fairly easy to hack. Once you have the regular expression, even if you're a num-num, here's where I've used it in my code. And you can sort of see that inside the parentheses, we can add the valid extensions that we want. So I could very easily, as a novice, hack this and put in addition, uppercase versions of all of these. Let me just show you where this expression is being tested. Somewhere down in here, where I loop through the number of users that I have, you'll see that I'm pushing my image URL in. But before I do that, I'm asking if that regular expression, if I test it against the current image URL, if that passes, then I will add that image to my array, or else I trace that it's an invalid URL, and I'll give you the user screen name and some other stuff. Again, the code here isn't really the most beautiful thing in the world, but it works right now. So let's do this one more time with that expression that I used. And I want to show you a user that gives me many problems. So we'll wait for the default to load in. And here, like I said, I had to really scrape the dregs of society here to find some users that would give me problems. So let's go to Jersey Shore, and let's just clear everything out real quick. And now we get another one here. What's this? Loader Max could not parse this URL. Check this out. .jpg normal.rem. I have no idea what that is. So here, a URL basically got past that regular expression because, notice, it had .jpeg in the URL. So it said, hey, you know what? I found .jpeg, you're good. But what it didn't consider was that after that string, there was this other dot with rem. And this took me a long time to sort of figure out because I was testing in the browser and I didn't know what the heck was going on. So here you go. This one did not pass my regular expression test because .jpeg is not at the end of my string. So what I did was I went back onto the internet and I found a group of nerds talking about how to do this, and they shouted about all this stuff, and eventually somebody came up with just what I was looking for. And here, this regular expression here makes sure that not only your extensions are uppercase and lowercase, but that they are the last items in your string. So let's go into my Flash. These guys, they say things like, why are you checking the URL? There's no guarantee that what you're going to get is an image, and no guarantee. You know what? We don't have to be that crazy. So off track, sorry. Let's go back to Flash. And now what I'm going to do in my actions is I'm going to say, all right, this regular expression didn't work for .rem after .jpeg. So we're just going to comment that out. I'm going to use the expression that I got off of that nerd war. And now when I test this out, and let's just pass in as the first thing that I load, so we don't have to wait, I'm going to pass in Jersey Shore. And you will see here that once the XML loads, that now my images all load, everything is great. And if I scroll up to the top of where all these images are being traced out, you will see that this new regular expression caught this URL as giving me an error. So this .jpeg underscore normal.rem does not pass the test of that new regular expression that I'm using, which is great. And if we type in some other users here, maybe we go to back to American Idol and hit load. Let's clear this out. You will see, let's just close it right now, because right away you'll see that we detected that this URL is no good because it doesn't have an extension, and right now we're not allowing the .jpeg in. I'm probably going to add that in because those should be fine, and also another URL without an extension. So there we go. We have our regular expression validating the fact that our image URLs are in fact something that Loader Max's parse method can recognize. Now, this is great when I can see all these traces in Flash, but what isn't so great is once I go out to the browser and I start encountering these errors, okay? So what I did was I created a debug version of my Swift, and before I show you that, let's show you this. So let's say I'm testing this out and I want to load in BGR, okay? While I'm loading, I really don't know what's happening behind the scenes here, okay? I'm sort of, once I get that blank screen, it's up to me to twiddle my thumbs and try to figure out what's happening. Well, what's great about our modern browsers like Chrome, Firefox, and Safari is that they have various debugging tools built into them. And if I just go to Inspect Element here, I showed you this the other day. If I go to Resources and then reload in BGR, what you're going to see is a list of all those images that are loading. And so now I can sort of see maybe where a certain image hangs up or what's going wrong. If I go to my network, this is super cool. here we have a list of all the images that need to load and also their HTTP status. The 200 code means it's okay. So for all of those images that I loaded, I can see whether or not there is some sort of hang-up. And what was happening was that some images would take a real long time to load, like maybe 30 seconds or a minute. So I'd just be staring at my Swift just sort of hung up. Now the reason for this was that an error wasn't happening, but things were taking a long time for those onComplete events to fire. So in order for me to track this in Flash, what I did was I built the debugger version, which allows me to load in assets, and while they're loading, let's just say, all right, maybe it hung up. I can say show all loaders, and what this will do is give me a list of all the loaders that I'm loading and their status. A status code of 2 means that the asset is loaded. Status code of 1 means that the asset is currently loading. So when I hit this show all loaders, I could see literally the progress of all the loaders that had loaded. Let's go to Macy's and hit load. All right? If I say show all loaders, once the XML loads, you know, a lot of them haven't loaded yet. Click again, a lot less of them are red. And what would happen is eventually, you know, if I was sitting here and things were spinning, what I could do is also cancel the loaders. So what I might do is put some timeout functionality in here. So once these guys are loading, I could, if it ever hung up, I could say cancel, and it would automatically stop loading things, and then I'd be cool. All right. So unfortunately, I can't demonstrate one of these accounts with an image that is hanging up on me. Next, I'm going to talk about loading images from a domain other than the domain your Swift lives on. And this is going to be a real fun one. So I'll catch you guys soon.